Alright, welcome back. This is part 2 of our Weird Tales, September 1937. In this one, I wanted to read off the letters. I'm going to read every letter, word for word. I think it's a great time capsule. You know, this stuff wasn't mainstream. Weird Tales was not a mainstream thing at the time. And it was like how we are now. The fans of vintage horror, only there was current horror at the time. You know, there was no Instagram, no YouTube or whatever. So this is how they got together and they wrote letters. I mean, there's a guy who says that he was pen pals with H.P. Lovecraft. Like, that's how these guys weren't famous at the time. They were very accessible. And it's just cool to see the community. And I wanted to read off the letters also because, as I mentioned in the previous video, the part 1, where I do the review of this issue, this is shortly after H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard have died. So it's 6 months H.P. Lovecraft, 2 months Robert E. Howard. And there's some tributes in the letters, and they're very beautiful. And I just wanted to read these letters. All right, so here we go. The Genius of Lovecraft. Francis Flagg writes from Tucson, Arizona. The death at a relatively early age of Howard P. Lovecraft has undoubtedly robbed weird literature of one of its master writers. Lovecraft and I had corresponded over a number of years on such subjects as monarchism, socialism, communism, materialism, religion, and incidentally, literature. Of Lovecraft's standing as a writer of great and unique talent, there can be little question. His weird tales are comparable to Poe's and superior to O'Brien's. I don't know who O'Brien is. There seems to be a tendency to separate Lovecraft the materialist from Lovecraft the weird artist and thinker, as if the man's brain had been contained in 2 compartments. But indeed this is wrong. Lovecraft was never more the materialist than he was the weird artist. There is a psychological reality in many of his tales that could only have been set down by a materialist thinker. This was true of Poe, and a study of Lovecraft's writings, comparing them to the products of contemporary weird writers, will reveal that this is true of him also. Lovecraft is dead, and it is with keen sense of loss and real grief that I realize his brilliant letters will never come my way again. Oh, so that was sad. It was like his buddy. I can only imagine Lovecraft's opinions on monarchism, socialism, communism, materialism, and religion are probably progressive for the time. I'm assuming, right? All right, next letter. This just says RALD. Louis Couslan of West Haven, Connecticut writes, as a recent reader of Weird Tales, I wish to convey my congratulations to the best fantasy magazine on the market. Your stories are of a type which holds my attention to the end. The list of authors is a list of the kings and sometimes queens of fantasy. Here's the way I size the July issue up. The cover, by Virgil Finlay, is the best that I've ever seen on any magazine. Rald and Thrine stand out as if they were real. How long has Mr. Finlay been doing your covers? He is practically perfect. I vote The Thief of Forth the best story, closely followed by The Whistling Corpse and Raider of the Spaceways. Has Clifford Ball ever written any other stories about Rald? If not, urge him to do so. And then Weird Tales responds, yes, Mr. Ball has written a stirring novelette, The Goddess Awakes, which tells of another weird adventure of Rald, the Thief of Forth. It will be published in this magazine soon. Weird Tales is tops. Bryce M. Walton of Martu, Idaho writes, I have read Weird Tales steadily for the last 5 years, and I say it's tops. It is It is not only tops among weird chronicles, but will stand the test against the so-called quality magazines. I feel you there, Bryce. It is a subtle air of difference, of indescribable and weird inspiration guiding your author's pens that keeps Weird Tales on top. Preserve that atmosphere and you can't lose. In my humble opinion, it is not necessary to load the stories with nauseating and hair-raising monstrosities, although I realize their appropriateness, of course. But it seems to me that the sheer etheric beauty that pervades many of your stories is oftentimes more at home between your covers than the horror and terror types. Pure beauty is very, very weird, for in this world of ours it is rarely witnessed or felt. Therefore it falls under the category of unusual and bizarre, upon which Weird Tales is based. Examples of this type that I can recall to mind without reference are C.L. Moore's Lost Paradise, and other stories by that author. Also many parts of Clark Ashton Smith's Incomparable Fantasies. Mrs. Brundage's cover for The Carnal God in the June issue was the best cover I have seen, nude or no nude. It depicted better than words the weirdness that lay beneath the cover. It fairly shrieked aloud from the newsstands, drowning everything else into the background. Nice. I would love to see what magazines they're talking about when he mentions the nauseating and hair-raising monstrosities, because that sounds cool to me too, though I do appreciate how weird. He's right, Weird Tales is different. It's a different kind of story, and I think you'll notice in these letters everyone kind of calls it something else. Like, if your favorite thing is sci-fi, the person calls it sci-fi. If it's fantasy, they call it fantasy. If it's horror, they call it horror. And that's how I feel Weird Tales is. It's very indescribable. It's all of those things, but nothing exactly that. Let's read on. Howard and Lovecraft. Betty Murray of Akron, Ohio writes, I want to weep on your editorial shoulder about what, to me, as to hundreds of other readers, is an acute personal loss. I mean the loss of Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. Of the two, my personal favorite was Howard, as his blood and thunder type of stories appealed more to me, but I fully recognized and appreciated the mastery of Lovecraft in his more truly uncanny field. Howard's tales were classics. They rank with the greatest of all great adventure stories. His characters lived and breathed. Lovecraft veiled his yarns with chiffon. They were misty horrors seen dimly and were less read than I felt, I think. To the creator of King Cole, Conan the Mighty, Brule the Spear Slayer, and Solomon Kane, for glory perished hail, to glory present veil, to the great HPL, honor and praise, as the ancients said, O kings live forever. I do earnestly hope that you will see fit to present books with the complete and collected works of these two colossi of weird literature, prose and poetry both, for the benefit of the ravening hordes of readers who would welcome them. Now to say my say about Weird Tales. I think it's swell. Since 1929, when I first recall reading our mag, it has progressed by the proverbial leaps and bounds from mediocrity to the real thing. Of course, some stories over the years have crept in which were out of place, poorly written, banal, or otherwise not so hot. This is natural and unescapable. No publication could hope to maintain a standard of perfection, and the tares do grow, even in the most carefully cultivated wheat. The good stories and the splendid stories more than make up for the few lousy ones. Of your authors, what can be said? C.L. Moore, Clark Ashton Smith, Earl Pierce, Indo Binder, Mary Councilman, Henry Kuttner, the supremely smooth Seabury Quinn, and all the rest are great. I'm not too crazy about Robert Bloch, but that may be prejudiced. I can't quite forgive him for razzing Howard. I don't know what she's talking about. That's interesting. I do applaud very loudly C.L. Moore, who has the mysterious touch of genius. E. Hoffman Price is another grand writer. I shall never forget The Stranger from Kurdistan, and I do wish it could be reprinted again. I have liked immensely Quinn's occasional stories about persons other than Dr. de Grandin, although The Saucy Jewels is my first love in your magazine and remains a prime favorite. I wish you would go light on the space fiction and scientific stuff. A little for those who like it, yes, but not too much. Keep Weird Tales weird. This means the Dr. Satan type of thing too. And please don't stop running serials. Some of your best stories have been serials. They give a person something to look forward to each month. All right, so there we go. That was number one, a beautiful tribute to Howard and Lovecraft. I love that it's Betty from Ohio. Rock on, Betty. I like that she didn't want any space science fiction stuff in her weird tales. Like I said, you're going to see more of that. You're going to see more of the people poking the genres and what they see weird tales as. I think she shouts out so many of the authors. C.L. Moore is in a lot of these letters. She was very popular. Yeah, keep weird tales weird. I like that. All right, speaking of C.L. Moore, here's the next letter. Northwest Smith. Dorothy Hoyt of New York City writes, before a boost, a whale, why oh why can't we have Northwest Smith and his slinky Venusian friend again? Is there a conspiracy on to keep him out of weird tales? I'd rather read about him than any other character, though Conan and Jarell, by the way, where is she, are also favorites. Jules de Grandin and Dr. Satan are two more pets. In the July issue, the Ocean Ogre was swell, so was the Thief of Forth. But please, some of the old ones next. Here's waiting for Northwest Smith. And then Weird Tales replies, you will soon have Northwest Smith and Jarell too, and a new story by C.L. Moore. It's so neat to see what was coming up. That we know all the stories that existed from these authors. They were there, they wrote them all, they passed, we've had them collected. And it's just so interesting to see it from this perspective of when it was coming out. How exciting it must have been. How excited these people, they wanted to see more Northwest Smith. And so they wrote a letter like, where I want to see more of this. I'm like, hey, here you go. That's just amazing because I wish that we could get more Jarell. I wish I could write a letter to Weird Tales right now and we'd have a new Jarell story. That would be amazing. All right, next letter. A new Conan, ? Lawrence A. Lamb of New York City writes, when I heard Conan was dead, I didn't hurry to the stands on the first of each month as quickly as before. But now I have found a writer, Mr. Clifford Ball, author of Duar the Accursed and the Thief of Forth, who hurries me as fast as ever. Probably the name is a pseudonym, or has the shade of Howard returned. I never heard of him before, but I'll be glad to hear of him again. What chances? ? Weird Tales replies, we shall shortly publish a fascinating novelette of RALD, the Thief of Forth. No, Clifford Ball is not a pen name. So there's more of that RALD. I guess they were jonesing for Conan and they got RALD. I don't know. I'll have to look into it after this is over. Next letter is titled Miss Hemkem Speaking. I love how many females writing into Weird Tales. It's very cool. Miss Hemkem Speaking. Gertrude Hemkem, whom we recently had the pleasure of meeting is for the first time, writes from Chicago. The sea seems to be an inexhaustible source of inspiration for shuddering yarns. We find The Whistling Corpse and The Ocean Ogre in one issue. I prefer the former by author Pendarves. There is more gripping intensity, more fear. Mr. Smith's verse to HPL is so suited to that master of weird fiction, which brings to mind that which has bothered me for a long time. I would like to have a copy of Lovecraft's Fungi from Yuggoth. I have some verses, but would like the complete set. Is it available? Well, HK, Raider of the Spaceways wasn't bad. If you hadn't directed your characters to the night side, I would not have liked the story. Why is darkness so fearfully fascinating? Kelly is really going to town with the last pharaoh. Bodiless heads are so very strange an idea to me that I can't quite conceive the utter enormity of it all. That Atma should suddenly appear in one piece is surprising. Even though our heroine and kid brother are supposedly safe, I have a sneaking suspicion the whole thing is a hoax. With profound and abject apologies to the author should my suspicions prove incorrect. Hey, my mind isn't quite clear about the creeper in the crypt. When the creeping thing slithered over the basement floor and used the gangster Rigetti for a tasty tidbit, Mr. Block tells us of the thing supposedly feeding on the gangster. Yet the closing paragraph just has Rigetti chewed to ribbons. Wasn't the creeper very hungry? Anyhow, that sound as of marrow being sucked out, my throat still contracts and I have the greasiest feeling all the way down my esophagus. You're a reprint. I like him, for you see, I like stories of time in the past, scenes of things that happen, to witness them in our present state. What else but a time machine can offer that? Or isn't my meaning clear? No, it's not. It doesn't matter. Of course, I didn't like this man's going back so far. And then Weird Tales replies, as to your query about fungi from Yuggoth, Messrs. Wandry and Derleth are working to bring out a volume of HPL's verse. Other projected volumes will contain his stories and letters. Next letter, titled Pendarves Sea Story. Donald Allegira of Springfield, Missouri writes, Finlay's cover for July is the best yet. It's really a masterpiece. I only wish he could have given us a few Conan covers. He depicts the thief almost as I had pictured Conan to myself. I'm delighted to note the increase in Pendarves' output. He's a masterful writer. The Whistling Corpse is one of his best. It's just about the best weird story of the sea I've ever read. Vying with this story for first place is The Last Pharaoh, a great story by another remarkable find. Jailbreak is very well done and packs a surprise. The Thief of Fourth is close behind the first two. Ball is still a little rough in his style, but his plots are good, and he handles action incredibly. Let him give us a series. The June Weird Tales is studded with some fine stories. The best, of course, is The Carnal God. Spear is a master. The cover for the story was attractive, but poorly proportionate, I thought. Alright, next letter, titled 100%. Gertrude Gordon of New York City writes... Wait, didn't we already have Gertrude? No, it's a different Gertrude. Gertrude Gordon of New York City writes, in all fairness, I feel I should send as enthusiastic a card praising this month's Weird Tales as was critical the card I sent a month or so ago protesting against the stories. This month, the magazine is 100% real Weird Tales. I don't think you ever got a better number. I feel a lot better. I like the cover. Virgil Finlay evidently reads the stories and gets the pictures like the text, which is much more than Brundage ever does. The cover is splendid. The stories are all fine. Even the reprint is unusually good. I like the new character RALD in The Thief of Fourth. Evidently we will have a new Conan type. This type is almost as lovable, fully as fascinating. I hope we hear more of him. All the stories are so good, I cannot select one specifically. Congratulations and thank you. Lot on that Thief of Fourth. Interesting. And then they're not a fan of Margaret Brundage there. She doesn't read the stories. From a French enthusiast. Jacques Baget of Paris writes, over a year has elapsed since I last wrote to you. Weird Tales still remains the unique magazine and has printed some outstanding tales during that year, such as Moore's Lost Paradise, Lovecraft's Haunter of the Dark, Williamson's Ruler of Fate, and Howard's The Hour of the Dragon. I deeply and sincerely mourn the passing of H.P. Lovecraft. I believe that Lovecraft is one of America's greatest writers, an equal of Poe. I believe that recognition of this fact will come after a lapse of years, as with Poe. Such tales as the music of Eric Zahn, the dreams in the witch house, and the temple, as well as his cycle of the elder gods and strange civilizations, and the extraordinary through the gates of the Silver Key, will remain marking a writer of extraordinary power, to be placed with Poe, Wells, Machen, and Blackwood. The passing of Lovecraft seems to me to mark the end of an epoch in the history of American imaginative fiction. A history that begins with Poe, continues with Bierce's Can Such Things Be?, Chambers, The King in Yellow, Merritt's The Moon Pool, and then the era of fantastic story magazines, of which only Weird Tales and a science fiction magazine now continue to print real fantasy. I think that many of the stories published in this last era, and among them almost all of Lovecraft's, were great and will endure. And in spite, or perhaps because of, my scientific training, I sometimes think that perhaps Lovecraft had a glimpse across undreamable abysses of facts about the structure of our universe that science will one day discover. I hope that Weird Tales will go on, printing less and less stories of fear and horror and more stories of real fantasy. There have been in your pages too many werewolves, vampires, and primordial slime. Stories by young authors which I would term really weird tales are Block's The Dark Demon, Kuttner's The Eater of Souls, and Johnson's They. I thank you again for many enjoyable stories. So there's one that says this isn't horror, that he thinks this is fantasy. Very prophetic here. This guy, yeah, he was on it, huh? He kind of saw how wonderful, how celebrated H.P. Lovecraft would be. Nice. He knew what was going on. He's wrong about this not being horror, though. This is a horror magazine. Just kidding. It's everything. It's weird. It's its own thing. Next letter. Orchids to Mrs. Brundage. M.E. Ellison of Jefferson City, Missouri writes, an orchid to M. Brundage for her superb cover design. 2 orchids to Weird Tales for the June issue. Every story, swell. Here's a whole bouquet to the co-authors of The Carnal God. A great story in every respect. Let me cast my vote to John R. Spear and Carlisle Shinser for their story. Glad you are having Spear in your magazine again. He can appear in your issues often and we won't mind. Next letter is titled Howard Reprints Requested. Leslie M. Bullen of Cheshire, England writes, some 6 or 7 months have elapsed since I first purchased one of your admirable magazines. And since then I have read each number with great avidity. Owing to the difficulty I experienced in obtaining copies, I only recently heard of the unfortunate death of Robert E. Howard, and I take this opportunity of saying how very sorry I was. In my humble opinion, he was a more than successful rival to that prince of imaginative writers, Edgar Rice Burroughs. I hope that in the future you will reprint some of his past stories and give those of us who unfortunately miss them a chance of enjoying them. Of course, I like the other tales very much and think them far above the standard of other periodicals. So imagine being in a time when you couldn't have all the Robert E. Howard stories. You had to wait and hope that they would reprint some. Sad world, sad world. Where are we? This one's titled Nix on Logical Endings. Robert Leonard Russell of Mount Vernon, Illinois writes, the May issue is one in which I just can't pick the best story, with 3 as fine as the Salem Horror, the Horror in the Burying Ground, and Duar the Accursed. I am stumped when it comes to picking number 1. The first 2 are in the Lovecraft fashion, and the third has all the ruggedness and sweep of a Conan yarn. I liked everything in the issue except the Mark of the Monster. It seemed like a blurred carbon copy of the late H.P. Lovecraft's classic The Dunwich Horror. Nix on these logical endings and weird tales. Brundage did a swell job on the cover, her best in an eon. Where on earth did you find this Jim Mooney? His illustration for the Salem Horror was the very essence of the bizarre, full of shadowy suggestions. Let's have more by him soon. Thanks for giving us the Horror on the Links. It was originally published just a short time before I became a reader of Weird Tales. Please print more of the early de Grandin tales and plenty of old Lovecraft yarns. I believe you should print an occasional serial 2, 3, or 4 parts, but never any of these 6, 7, or more part yarns. All right, serials. The serials are kind of annoying in that we now can't get them, but of course we can get the collections. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on it. I take it back. Attracted by the cover. Virginia Durlam of Wichita, Kansas writes, I happened to pick up a copy of your April magazine purely by accident, attracted by the unusual picture on the cover. After reading the story from which this illustration was made, I have decided to make Weird Tales one of my regular purchases at the newsstand. John R. Spear's Symphony of the Damned, I consider one of the best stories of its type I have ever read. I was too interested to put the book down until I had finished reading it, thereby missing part of my sleep, but consider that the story was worth it. Please print more of Mr. Spear's stories. He has a wonderful gift for making one feel the same emotions as do the characters he created. This next one is Merritt's Tree Story. Captain J. Wilmer Benjamin writes from Lewisburg, West Virginia. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job with Weird Tales. I marked 2 stories in the April issue. Don't comment often, for it seems presumptuous to point out the faults in other writers' stuff, if any, and seems hollow to praise everything, and someone has borrowed said issue. But I personally prefer the stories which deal with modern life. There are exceptions. I liked Conan. He was lusty and vigorous. He quite took away your breath at times. And more can write, all right. And more can write, all right. Best story you ever ran of the type was the one you used originally, then reprinted. Can't recall the name, but it was all about the trees in the woods. They lived. Oh, this guy is nonsense. I still have it around someplace, think it is well worth keeping. And then Weird Tales replies, the story referred to is A. Merritt's truly remarkable tale, The Woman of the Wood. Alright, the next one. The Witch Walks. Walter L. Reeve of Sharon, Massachusetts writes, the April issue was so good it's hard to pick the best story. I'd rate Symphony of the Damned first, followed by The Mannequin and The Death Mask. The reprint was exceptionally good. I'd like to see more poems such as The Witch Walks in Her Garden in Weird Tales. While we're not really going the distance myself, I can remember when stationed in the heart of the Bitterroot Mountains in Idaho, I used to send all the way to Orofino and have my favorite magazine, Weird Tales, brought to me by pack train. We were about 70 miles from Orofino at the time. Alright, we got 3 more. Raider of the Spaceways. Johns Harrington of San Fernando, California writes, with the July issue of your magazine, I followed my general rule of reading the stories that sounded and looked like the best first. In scanning the table of contents, I tabbed Raider of the Spaceways by Henry Kuttner to be saved for the very last, because I have somehow built up a prejudice against these far-in-the-future yarns. Usually they seem very much overloaded with unnecessary pseudo-scientific data that barricade the mind from the intellectual relaxation for which most people read your entertaining stories. What is more, this type of tale is usually weighted down with weird wordage and the terrific terrors appear strained. May I say that Raider of the Spaceways not only contained the proper amount and handling of the pseudo-scientific, but also concerned the sort of living, easy-to-imagine horror which makes you enjoy a weird tale to its utmost. I thought this yarn was the best in the issue, although there were other very good ones. I thought Raider of the Spaceways one of the most fascinating and thrilling yarns I have read in your magazine in a long while, though I almost always enjoy the total contents of each issue. Not a science fiction fan. Concise comments. An unsigned letter from Spokane, Washington says, whoops! The man on the cover of last January's issue has the features and hair of my own dear husband. After reading of the nasty habits of the man on the cover, I was mad at my honey pap for days. Alan V. Pershing of Anderson, Indiana writes, I would have liked the mark of the monster first rate, indeed, if the author had not explained things rationally at the end. This explanation ruined the whole story for me because it left a sour taste in my mouth. I like my horrors raw. MC Ellis of Walla Walla, Washington. Oh, they smashed them all together here at the end. All right, so these are just like the short letters. MC Ellis of Walla Walla, Washington writes, my first choice of stories in the June issue is The Carnal God by John R. Spear and Carlisle Schnitzer. This story is very fascinating and is the type I particularly enjoy. The cover design portraying the characters of this story is very attractive. Raymond Klimkamp of Columbia, Missouri writes, I was very sorry to hear of the death of H.P. Lovecraft, and in my poor opinion, Edgar Allan Poe couldn't hold a competition with him, at least in any of his works that I have read. His Haunter of the Dark and The Thing on the Doorstep I consider unrivaled masterpieces. I also liked Henry Haas's Guardian of the Book, although I thought the plot motive ran practically parallel. Florence B. Smith of Los Angeles writes, I like Clifford Ball's Thief of Forth. He has something in his character RALD, a bit like Conan, a most likable rogue. May we have some more, please? A.V. Ross of London, England writes, have been a reader of Weird for 3 years now. Congratulations. Your magazine is really unique. Give us more exotic fantasy like C.L. Moore's Tree of Life and less horror. So yeah, there's all the letters. Seems like the RALD character there was pretty popular. Some people don't consider Weird Tales horror. They don't consider it science fiction. They want it to be this. They want it to be that. This is how I picture it. This is how I picture things also. When I like something, I make it what I want it to be. But you need to be conscious of that you're doing it, and remember that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you want to call it, what shelf you want to put it on. And I think that truly Weird Tales is its own thing. It became its own genre. That it had its own feel. And it was elements of horror. It was elements of fantasy and science fiction and sword and sorcery. Adventure. They took all of these wonderful pulpy genres and they just mixed them all together, and it became something so original, and it's so beautiful. And I love it, and all those people loved it, all those people in the letters section, no different than we are today, sitting here talking about it in our way. And I just wanted to share that with everyone. So I will see you at Pulp Fest in August. I'll probably make another video before then, but you should go to Pulp Fest in August. Don't forget the shirts on my online shop, link down in the description there. And I will see you later.